I guess how far would you like to go? Without Paul, or are you comfortable? Just
Oh, no, I'm happy to. Yeah, I mean, he's almost certainly not going to get on. It sounds like. I think he's down in Marana. It's super busy, so I'm happy to talk with you guys and walk through this a little bit. So
okay. Well, I guess for my from my perspective, or all of ours, could you describe, kind of give us a high level understanding of your organization and
yeah.
any kind of key variables or thoughts that you have on this general concept?
Yeah. So the organization. I mean, it's how much you know about how we're structured. I mean, do you have some basic idea of what we're doing, or do you want me to?
I would say pretty basic. If you could assume we don't know anything,
okay.
That would probably be most helpful.
Okay, so we're part of Dignity Health, which is part of the larger organizations, Common Spirit, nationally, Common Spirit Health. So Arizona General consists of two hospitals. One of them is really kind of a micro hospital on the west side of Phoenix, Levine area, and then we have a larger hospital, which is about 50 beds, and in Mesa, where I'm at right now, and then. Both of those have an emergency room, okay? And then there are 12 satellite EDs, which are scattered around the city, okay? So a total of 14 emergency departments. In any given emergency department, there's a minimum of one physician at all times. Many of them have, or several of them have, a physician and a PA, or in the two largest, a physician and two PAs at a time. Sometimes a second physician, depending on what's going on. Mm-hmm. So at any given moment, so it's interesting to me. Well, again, to give you a sense of how many, we're seeing about 600 patients a day total between the 14 emergency departments. Okay. And those then feed into the two hospitals, right, for admissions if they're appropriate for these smaller hospitals, or out and elsewhere into the Dignity system, depending on what's going on. So the operational challenge is sort of load balancing, right? Because a small ER is harder to staff than a large ER, right? Because a big ER, if I've got, if I'm seeing 200 a day in one ER and I've got 5 doctors there, and there's a sudden surge to 250 patients that day, they can absorb it, right? But if it's one doctor seeing 20 patients and all of a sudden it's 40, it breaks, right? So you have that multiplied by 14, basically 14 smallish ERs, and any one of them can be in the weeds at a given moment, right? So how do you load balance that? You can't staff to the surge; it's cost prohibitive. So load balancing is key. So some way of communicating a telemedicine type solution between sites, where it makes it easy for two things. Well, so that's one problem. Let me back up. That's one issue. Another issue is collaboration and sort of knowledge sharing, hive mind kind of thing, right? So you work in a large emergency room and you got 5 doctors all the time, and it's easy to bounce something off your colleagues. It's easy to, hey, I got this issue and I can't find, an appropriate follow-up for this patient. But if you got 5 people there, it's almost a guarantee someone has interacted with somebody and, they can figure it out, right?
Sure.
So that collaboration. So basically I've got 14 isolated islands right now. So a communication solution for the physicians between them is important. A way to actually a physician in one site to talk to a patient in another would be also valuable, because the way the workflow in an ER is the patient comes in initially and a nurse sees them and does kind of a basic triage. Are they, super sick, or can they wait, right? And then the physician has to see them, or a provider has to see them, maybe a PA, depending on, the circumstances. They see them and write orders and get things started. So if it's really busy and your waiting room is backed up at a given site, if you can put a patient in front of a remote doctor and have them talk, get orders started, get the process going, that would be invaluable. So those are the two big needs we have for a telemedicine type solution. So we've played with some things in the past, using InTouch, which has been absorbed by Teladoc. We played with that. We actually use that as our platform for one specific kind of case of neurology, stroke consults coming from the big stroke center. But it's a little hinky to use, and it's not a great solution for a always on kind of thing. It could do it, but it's a little cost prohibitive, and there are some tech challenges to it. So a more friendly solution would be valuable. So, Mikhail has been talking about this and been playing with it, and they, set up the rooms, and when you have interested physicians, right, the sort of early adopter types, it's been fairly successful, I think, and they're sort of proving out the use case, and that begins to bring, people in who can't be bothered to play with new things unless it has value. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Really interesting. Thank you for that. And is there, if we were to, try to focus or tackle one of those, is there one that, you would pick as, hey, the first thing I'd like is this, if it were possible?
I think what he's been playing with, and I haven't personally been in it and played with it myself.
Okay.
But what he's playing with right now, the way I understand it, is rooms set up very similar to what we're in right now, right? And just sort of is on. So a physician can sign in, they bring your iPad or laptop, they sign in, and they just keep it open and run. So that is a great use. One other issue that we have, I guess, let me add one more thing in here, right, is it comes back to load balancing, but it's on the other end, right? So instead of the triage early interaction, with our current status in Phoenix, many places right now, it's very difficult to get transfers done. So a patient may be in the ER for a long time, right? You may say, you have pneumonia, you need to be admitted. I'm working on getting you a bed, start your antibiotics, everything's happening. But then, 24 hours later, that patient's still sitting there, right? And there's a lot of working the phones that has to happen, and a constant reassessment of the patient, making sure their orders are current, because our system isn't designed for continuity of care. It's designed for episodic care, right? So one solution we're implementing right now for that is adding a physician who is a remote, right, or could be at one of the other sites, but we're going to do them probably remote, whose job is to basically look at the entire system, all 14 ERs, and see where the holds are, the patients waiting for beds, and to go into the health record, look at those patients, make sure everything's up to date, reassess the patient, maybe really, wow, could this person really be discharged? They've been here for 24 hours and they're doing well on antibiotics, right? All that. Well, one of the use cases for this would be to be able to just communicate directly with a physician who's on duty and say, hey, Bob, I looked at this patient, and maybe you want to reassess them. Looks like they might be able to go home, or hey, Bob, that guy needs his antibiotic, needs a new antibiotic order, or what, right? And we'll just basically work the phones for them and kind of take that load off where they're seeing the new people that can keep rolling through the door.
Got it. And when you say transfers, is that to another ER or to one of the hospitals?
Hospital, to another hospital.
Okay. Right. Got it.
You come in, you have COVID pneumonia, you need to be admitted. I'm waiting for a bed somewhere for you.
Got it.
And might not be in our system.
Yeah. And where, well, with the exception of your last comment, if the data exists, where is that data currently? Is it in your EMR, or where is that data?
The EMR. You mean like what's happening to the patient? Yeah, it sits in the EMR.
Okay. Yeah. And what about capacity at all the facilities, ERs, hospitals? Where is that data? What's
happening at any given moment?
Well, I guess that also, but how many beds are occupied? How many beds are open?
Right. There's several different systems depending on what you're looking at. So if you're talking about the ER itself, right, we have our electronic health record. And you can look at any moment and say, there's, I've got 9 beds at Camelback ER, and All 9 are full and there's 6 people in the waiting room. I can
Okay.
like, dial in there and see that, right?
Okay.
That's the moment in time. You want a moment in time for hospital beds. We have our internal system, right, which is dignity wide. It's called Teletracker, okay, and it's a way of requesting and tracking beds. What's clean, what's dirty, what's what patients are waiting for, what kind of bed, right? 'Cause there's always bed silos, ICU, tele, whatnot, right?
And is that a proprietary system or
Teletracker proprietary?
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they all are on some fashion, right? Someone created them and they're proprietary. So our EMR in the emergency department is the T system, okay? This is Arizona General, okay, specifically now. And then we have an inpatient kind of brand X thing that's called Evident. So we're getting rid of both of those. In June, we're moving to Cerner. So the entire Dignity system in the Valley, in Phoenix area will be on Cerner.
Okay.
Okay.
So Teletracker and T system will be moving over to Cerner.
Well, Teletracker is independent. Teletracker will live on. That's
okay.
That's already a Dignity wide system.
Okay. And do you know if there's any API or interface where we might be able to pull and push data to Teletracker, just focusing on that?
So I will say there must be, but I don't know directly. Right?
Okay.
Because it clearly is because it clearly interacts with Cerner. Doesn't interact with our EMR, but I mean it's got to be an API there. It would be crazy for that type of system to not have several APIs because it's got to interact with.
Sure. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then with respect to load balancing, another aspect that you mentioned would be, incoming people, right? Do you currently have, any kind of app or anything where just as a concept where, when people are make an initial call to one of these centers or are headed in or something, that theoretically, they could be directed to different facilities based on what their issue is and what the capacity is? Do you see anything that might work in that?
So right now, no, that's a concept that I would love to push. Like for our larger system, right? In a perfect world, and I don't know that this is demonstrated anywhere in the country, right? Anyone's doing this, but like in a perfect world, you'd say, hey, I think I need to go to the ER, and you have an interaction, somehow, right? Like, presumably a telemedicine style interaction with a provider of some sort who you talk to, who says, wow, that's you could be having a heart attack. You should go to this place, right? Here's this place to you that's appropriate, right? For you.
Or even don't do anything, call 911, right? If it's
fair, right. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
But I don't mean to complicate it. I'm just kind of thinking through the scenarios.
No, right. Yeah. So heart attack's maybe a bad example because that would be the correct answer. Is you should call 911 if you think. But you have whatever. I'm playing soccer and I rolled my ankle and it's all swollen up. Well, you can go to, one of the freestanding emergency departments that's perfectly capable of handling that, and, get an x-ray. So here's the closest one, go there. So you kind of are directing people rather than piling into the big ERs, right?
Right. Not only capacity, but waiting time, right? You could go to these two, but here's the shortest waiting time.
Over here, drive an extra 10 minutes and you'll save an hour, right?
Right.
So that's my sort of, goal going forward in Dignity is to integrate our delivery system in that way. Like we really could use that. So I've got my 14 ERs in Arizona General. I've got Chandler Regional has a giant ER, Mercy Gilbert has a giant ER, St. Joe's has a giant ER. And you want to send the right patient to the right place.
Right.
There's no system built to do that. People go where they go and you deal with them when they get there.
Got it. And so most people, do they just show up at the door or do they call first, or how do you first interface with, these emergency people? Right.
So the vast majority of the patient stream just shows up at the door, either themselves or via EMS. There is depending on who you're talking to, interesting new tool or a reviled thing. It's called InQuicker. Okay. And you can, if you just like, you can just Google the Dignity emergency room kind of thing. You'll find, the InQuicker link. And what it does is basically it lets you say, I would like to schedule an appointment to be seen in the emergency room, right? So some people find that the concept of scheduling your emergency to be ridiculous. The other people say, well, this is the reality of emergency medicine. And, people go to the ER for primary care type things. And, the public facing side of this is, instead of waiting in the ER, wait at home. So you sort of sign in and say, my ankle is swollen. And you sign in and it says, come at 1 p.m. Right? And so it's like an appointment. So there is an InQuicker system. It's a pretty tiny piece of the stream of patients right now, like 1 or 2%.
And is that third party or proprietary?
What do you mean? I want to be sure.
So is that something that that a vendor supplies, or is it something that was kind of created for you?
Yeah. When I was saying, when we used the word proprietary before, I was saying third-party vendor. It's like TeleTracker is a third-party vendor. There's lots of hospitals.
I see what you're saying. I guess to clarify, when I was saying proprietary, I meant in-house. That you've developed, your code. Your code base. Okay. So third party you're talking about as a vendor. Okay.
Yeah. Like InQuicker is owned by Stericycle. So Stericycle runs that. And lots of places use it. It's not just, besides Dignity, other places use it. So it's, it's emergent cares use it. And
right.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Okay. And then, so given the current reality, you've got very likely, or the risk is you've got too many people showing up at a place that has no capacity. So certainly I understand the concept that if you at least have a room or you have an iPad, right, that they can interface with someone remotely. Understand that. Do you have any other thoughts on how they can be redirected, or does it make sense that if they show up at the door and just say, hey, listen, we can see you in 2 to 4 hours, or if you want to drive here, they could see you now, something like that? Or
so you can't do that because this gets into the EMTALA law, right? So once a patient touches the door, right, they are if they I think the legal sort of languages of if they present seeking care, I have to do a medical screening exam
right
for that patient and establish whether or not there's a true emergency, a life-threatening or limb-threatening emergency. So once they're there, I can't say, God, we're really busy, you should go over here.
Yeah, right. I get that.
That's the problem, right? A patient can choose to leave, but you can't encourage that, and it's problematic. So you got to do it before they get there. So once they're there, I got to deal with them. So yeah.
Okay. And do you have any ideas on how to attract them or deal with them, before they show up at the door?
Well, yeah, you need to, it's a big deal. It's a big lift. You have to have a system that functions. Right. And you got to create public awareness that that this exists, and hey, call this number, go to this website, whatever. Yeah.
Right. And let's say that we built something, that would help with that aspect. Is that something that, you guys would have the budget and the inclination to advertise locally, to try to divert some of that flow?
So you're asking a system question, right? Like it's not Arizona General would stand this up, right? Because what it really would be Dignity Health, the Southwest Division of Dignity Health, which is all the hospitals in the valley, plus Yavapai, we're Yavapai, and then 3 of the Nevada hospitals. So it would be at least a division, or maybe a market level, maybe just Phoenix area kind of thing. So is there funding for something like that? Maybe. It's got to be. They want to be innovative. We have to be innovative to survive. I feel like, and is if there's and that's one of the reasons of, playing with this inside of AGH is very interesting, because if we can prove out the use case inside here for simple things like
Right.
physician communication, remote triage of patients, one place melts and the doctor who's sitting there or someplace else can talk to a patient at the busy place, and do triage. And this becomes, this is routinely used. It's easy to make the argument we could expand this like this.
Sure.
Yes. I mean,
sure.
This takes time.
And then an area that I've looked at and Paul has mentioned in a couple of different conversations is the concept of utilizing your resources to extend into rural areas. Is that something that you've thought about, or you feel that there's a need for?
Yes. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, so someone has an emergency in a rural area and there's not a nearby emergency center or maybe a specialist or what have you, so that, kind of extending outside of your walls, your service outside of your walls.
So it's just that's telemedicine, basically.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, yes. And remember, some of our footprint, is pretty large. I mean, it's very scattered. So we don't know how familiar you are with our local geography, but, we've got one of our freestanding EDs is in Goodyear. There's one way up in Surprise, and there's one way out in Santan, right? So you'll spend an hour and a half getting from Santan to Goodyear, right? I mean,
got it. Okay.
Yeah. So Santan's pretty rural. It's pretty out there by itself. It's that was the idea of planning there. Yeah. The divisional footprint is even larger. There are some urgent cares, right? That not in my area, but the rest of the division has. So there's one down in Maricopa, which is pretty rural, and Anyway, so there is a desire to do that sort of outreach. And there's hospitals, and I wouldn't call them sister facilities, but they're use us heavily, like Hoohoo Memorial, right? Is the on the reservation down south of us here, and they interact with Dignity on a regular. That's their transfer site. Typically, they end up in Chandler Regional, right? So, and being able to interface with those guys, with a face-to-face conversation would be very valuable if that was something that was easy to do.
Okay, and then I think you touched on earlier, or at least part of the concept. Is let's say in these ERs, within your network, like you mentioned cardiology. I believe me, I'm not a subject matter expert, but when they need a specialist, particularly ones that are in short supply, I assume currently they page or call them and describe the patient's situation and get their advice or what have you. Do you see a need kind of worth discussing in terms of formalizing that network within this kind of a system where rather than call them or page them, there might be a directory where they just click on it and it it gives them a certain tone on their cell phone, and you get the idea. And so that concept is both, so you've got specialists within your network that are I'm describing that as kind of within your employee base, or consulting based, depending on what the contract is. And then you could conceptually extend that to other specialists in other geographic locations and what have you. And I understand there may be some licensing issues there, but can you share your thoughts on, on that, I guess that concept with the two flavors, internal and external specialists?
Okay. So key to success in that, it would be how does the specialist get compensated? Okay. And so, that to bill for a telemedicine consult, right? There's very specific rules around that. To bill for a telemedicine consult, it can't be asynchronous, right? It's got to be synchronous, which obviously this would be. And it has to be video, there has to be, you have to be able to see and talk to the patient. So there's that. Okay. If it's just I don't think it would be successful to just create something that provides instead of me picking up the phone and calling the cardiologist, I'm going to have a video link to talk to the cardiologist. Why? Do I need to see him?
Okay.
No, right? And so in fact, I feel like we're moving more and more away from voice conversations because there's secure, texting things out there. Like we use Tiger Text in the Dignity system, which lets you move images and and text securely. So I could, whereas it's not HIPAA compliant to use a patient's name over, from my iPhone to yours, or send their EKG identifiably from my iPhone to yours. Tiger Text will let me do that. So a lot of times, like, I don't even need to talk to them. I can just send them a text like, "Hey, what do you think of this EKG? Here, take a picture of it, send it over Tiger Text." They send back like, "Yeah, I'd keep that," and that's the end of the story. There's no conversation. So I don't know, that's for people that are sort of in our network,
right?
I guess. Well, I guess it kind of come back to the only real reason to do that would be to let the specialist talk to the patient in the ER and have a billable event and a physician-patient relationship created.
Right. Well, and just for reference, so that type of, I'm familiar with Tiger Text. So, incorporating that type of functionality is certainly in the realm of what we're thinking about.
Yes.
So, it doesn't by any means have to be, all video or even audio.
No, right. Okay.
But it sounds like that is helpful. That it sounds like that may be kind of something secondary that, if we can solve a bigger problem, we can ask, hey, would this also help or what have you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is creating is letting us function. I would love for my little system here, but it's not a little system really, that we have half the ED visits in Dignity for Phoenix area, function like one big ER, right? Virtually. That's what you really want to create. I collaborate. Hey, it's busy over there. I can walk over and help out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then going back to when you're beyond capacity, so certainly you can, this platform, and just so you know, what we're on right now is the platform that Paul's using.
Yeah.
So is that adequate for a decent, or do you think that would be adequate for a decent percentage of cases, or is there kind of another solution? You mentioned, that something, that they've got to be admitted or evaluated or what have you before you could recommend that they go somewhere else. So would it be helpful to also have, is kind of admitting them, the paperwork of admitting, would it be helpful to have that as part of our platform? Or do you have that covered in your, in your EMR?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you run into so many obstacles with interfacing with the electronic health record, right? And the hospitals are very, increasingly intense about security around this because of the HIPAA risk.
Sure.
Getting any kind of anything where patient information from the EHR is moving through a third-party system is going to be really difficult.
Okay.
I would do this more because the way Paul's brought this in is, it's like I told him, it's way easier to get forgiveness than permission in Dignity, right? So it's like just, you just, it's a fait accompli. You have a HIPAA compliant system right here that you can talk to each other about patients over and just do it. And right. And now we're demonstrating like, oh, hey, okay, this is okay. And no one's objecting. But if you ask up front about this, it had been 30 layers of approval and we'd still be at step 2 of 50. Right.
So, got it. Okay. Well, that's really helpful. And, so in other use cases, I've heard a lot that, integrating to, as you go to Cerner, so having an integration with Cerner is really critical. But it sounds like based on what you just said, part of the value here is having just this communication functionality that doesn't, so I guess another way to put it is your doctors don't feel as they don't mind kind of having this functionality, and then on another computer or another tab, they're entering information, on the patient in the EMR and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. No, right. Exactly. That's how they're using it right now is, you're on their personal iPad or, computer laptop, which actually brings up an interesting, sort of in the weeds problem of, using this. So what is, well, okay, so I've got, let's say everyone today is on it. And so I've got 14 doctors on this thing. How does, any one of them know I want to talk to them? Right? We're not just sitting here waiting for something to happen, and you can't have the volume up and just sort of like constant babble going, right?
Sure.
Or there you have a screensaver, I don't know, whatever. There's no, at least right now, my understanding, there's no alerting mechanism, right? Like how do you get someone's attention? Like, hey, hop on the room real quick.
Sure. Craig Waldrop, can you, you may have knowledge of what Paul's doing now, or but could you go ahead with that?
Yeah. No. Mhm. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And most of these ERs are going to be, and this will be true in general for emergency medicine. It's not it's not a doctor's office or a consultant where you're going to be like, oh, let me go back to my office, right? Your office is in the middle of chaos, right? So yeah. So
Okay.
you got a Bluetooth and you got your headphones, whatever you
Yeah.
have a conversation without being loud, but you have to know to go look.
Got it.
That's not what you're doing. Yeah.
And based on your understanding, do you think that that alerting system, and if we have any other kind of initial text notices or what have you, is the personal cell phone of the MD? Do you think that's the right device? Obviously, historically, a lot of that's been on pagers.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. Not pagers.
Yeah.
No. The personal device makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, hospitals get all hinky about personal devices being used clinically for the security reason, and number two, that there's this sort of vague. I mean, it's different with our structure, but let's say you were somewhere where you had employed physicians. Well, if your doctors are using the cell phone for a business purpose, then the business should be paying for the cell phone, and they don't want to do that, right? There's all those factors to consider. So they tend to, provide like, Spectra links or other type phones. But for our system, the way it works, the cell phone is, I think, the best because every doc carries it pretty much at all times now, and because it's how you walk to the cafeteria, that's how the nurses get you if there's
right.
So
and this kind of initial functionality certainly can be structured where there's no exchange of PHI or anything, right? It's just please respond to please respond to this link, or please go to this location, or please call whoever, right? Those types of things.
Right. I mean, it would make I guess if I were making this up, I'd say, whoever signed into the room, their device, their personal cell phone or whatever they're using, their devices is, obviously the system knows who signed in and it knows their number. And
right.
I know who's on, and I want to talk to the Awatuki doc, and it's whoever, it's Aaron Mickelson, and I can say get Aaron Mickelson, and the system sends him a text, hey, hop on the room, right? That'd be the way to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Or I want to talk to everybody. We need to all get together and talk about something. Yeah.
You sure? There can be pre-selected groups, right? So
sure. And then you have to account for. How do you, so let's say I've got a patient I want, that I need help with, or the waiting room's, jammed at Levine. Someone needs to go out and triage patients and we can't physically go. So Awatuki's sitting on their butt. Can the Awatuki doc help? So how does that actually work? You have an iPad that's also assigned to the room, and that person takes it out there and, talks to the patient, but then everybody in the room theoretically could listen in on that. So that's a problem, So how do you sequester that, or do you have a different room that you go to for triage? Okay. Right. Yep. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. So you already have it built in. So then that would be, I just like carve this off and go talk to patients, right? So it's me and the iPad and whatever patient I put in front of it. So yeah. Okay.
And yeah, they would need to be, put in a separate room or what have you in terms of the confidentiality.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
um, and uh, what, how many, so your organization sounds very interesting and like an excellent fit for our base solution here that again can be the value can be increased and enhanced and what have you. Is your structure, your organizational structure pretty common, nationwide, where you've got kind of this hub and spoke type structure?
So it's becoming more common. It's not very common. The you know the freestanding ED, that's kind of the colloquial term people use. Freestanding ED thing took off about, I don't know, between 5 and 10 years ago, and it started off as a very I'm going to start my own freestanding ED, independent, kind of move.
Yeah.
And it was kind of Wild West, and there were big systems, that set up that were just nothing but freestanding ERs. Most of them have failed spectacularly. This is the legacy system here. Dignity basically bought the assets of Adeptus, who went bankrupt, and bought the Phoenix area assets. So there are other examples. There's not a lot around the country of systems similar to us where you've got, a large hospital with a bunch of freestandings attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
When you find them, it's a hospital with a couple of freestandings.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not this on this scale.
Got it. Okay. So it exists, but yeah, I get it that you guys are kind of unique. So, all right. Well, this is really interesting. I think Vito may have had to drop off, but Craig, do you have any other questions? I think from my perspective, I think I need to think about this a little bit. We need to discuss internally, and then I'm sure we're going to have some more questions. Probably more on kind of the really touch and feel that may go back to Mikhail on, and then. But this has been extremely helpful and really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But Craig, do you have any other questions or comments right now?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. 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 Well, and I've worked with Paul a long time. We were, business partners for a long time. He was one of my residents back at county in like the late '90s. So you got a guy who is very much a subject matter expert in terms of what this looks like in the pit, right? And in the ER and in the moment, and what will and won't work. So he's a great advisor for you on that. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, great.
No, you are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is, we have, because we have so much of the ED volume here in Phoenix, and I've run these places pretty successfully now for 3 years. We have the ear of the rest of Dignity on this stuff, so it's this is something I would like to scale in the Phoenix area. We need to prove it out here, and then I would love to see us scale this because it subsume some of the other ERs into this system. So there's some challenges getting there, but.
Well, these are really specifically the kind of use cases that we're looking for. So it definitely continues and after this call even more interesting on our side that providing filling some of these pain points that you described that's exactly what we're looking to do to enhance the kind of the base value that we have.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And
absolutely.
I think once we've kicked this around a bit, we'll certainly be back and look forward to speaking again in the future.
Perfect. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care.